India is sending some 500 planes and 3 ships to the GCC to retrieve nearly 1 million nationals who are working abroad in places like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and Kuwait. Because of the pandemic, so many Indians now have lost their jobs as economies have halted around the world. Meanwhile, the GCC is calling India Islamophobic, not because of this largest mass repatriation in history, but because of Prime Minister Modi's policies towards the religious minority in his country. So for more on this, we will bring in Vijay Prashad. He's a historian and a journalist. Vijay, good to see you again. First, can you talk to us a little bit about this so-called mass repatriation effort? Nearly 1 million Indian nationals are working in the GCC on work visas. Have those been canceled?
Well, there's actually 8.5 million Indians working in the totality of the Gulf states. They work from a range of occupations. They are bankers at the high end, and then they are construction workers, taxi drivers, domestic servants at the lower paid end. A very large number of them, at least 1 million, have lost their jobs as a consequence of the great lockdown, and they've been put in an extremely difficult position, which is why they've appealed to the Indian government to give them assistance. And that's what the Ministry of External Affairs, the Foreign Ministry of India, is attempting to do. It is indeed one of the largest airlifts, as it were, that we know of, and I don't exactly know how this is going to go.
And, you know, there is quite a bit of discrimination against Indians in places, for example, like Dubai. Many, as you mentioned, are construction workers there or what have you. Like you said, the lower scale workers. Could some of this repatriation due to job loss be due to misconceptions about coronavirus, that, you know, the foreigners bring the disease with them?
This might very well be the case, but I think the explanation here is simpler. A lot of projects have shut down. Many construction projects have closed down and so on. And a number of these workers, in very typical fashion, are the first to be let go. It needs to be said that work conditions in the Gulf states are horrendous. I've covered this, for years. Last year in the Indian Parliament, the government was asked how many Indians have been killed, have died as a consequence of the working conditions in the Gulf. And it's quite extraordinary. The government of India in Parliament said between 2014 and 2019, 34,000 Indians have died in their workplaces in the Gulf states. This is an enormous casualty rate. A lot of it is people falling off buildings as they are, working in construction or being beaten as domestic servants.
Absolutely. There's so much of this that goes uncovered, which you and I could talk about for a whole different segment, perhaps another day, Vijay. But sticking with this topic, can you speak a bit about Prime Minister Modi's policies, which the GCC are calling Islamophobic? Would you agree, or is this simply political jockeying for a position in a post-pandemic world?
Well, it's certainly political jockeying. There's no doubt about that. But something can be both political jockeying and true. It's certainly the case that the Gulf states have no moral ground upon which to criticize anybody. I mean, there's no freedom of speech in the Gulf states, let alone religious freedom. On the other hand, it's also true that the Modi government and the political party that Mr. Modi belongs to have been disgraceful in their targeting of Muslims in this time of the COVID pandemic. They routinely blame Muslims for things, and once again, they are blaming Muslims. It's actually quite shameful that Mr. Modi and his government don't own up to the fact that they behave very badly. People have been going out there saying Muslims are extraordinarily spreaders of this virus. Is not true at all. So both things are true. Yes, the government has been Islamophobic, and yes, the Gulf states have no moral leg upon which to stand.
And real quickly, Vijay, last question here. It appears that both the GCC cooperation countries depend on India, depend on Indian workers. India, at the same time, does send out the workers, and they send back money to their families. So both sides need one another. How do you see this shaking out in the months to come?
a lot of this is just jockeying.